It's Wednesday, November the 24th. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And the Bass Pro Shop US Open tournament concluded last weekend. And a couple young men from, I believe it was Auburn University, a couple college students, won like $1.2 million. So, I mean, that's a life-changing deal for them. That's great. And also, Johnny Morris donated over $1 million to the Missouri Department of Conservation. I believe it was mainly for fish habitat. So that big event, I mean, in the long run, it's going to help all of us out. That money that he donated, they're going to work on putting fish habitat back into our lakes. And it definitely helped the economy in the area, you know, brought a lot of people in. But as far as the fishing, you know, the lake level, they've been generating quite a little bit of water last few days. Lake levels come down about 6 inches since my report last week. And I'm finding water temperatures anywhere from 55 to about 58, 59 degrees. And, you know, like we've been talking about the last month or so, the fall is definitely all about the shad. You know, finding the shad, you'll find the fish. And I think in that tournament this past weekend, I think 7 of the top 10 were all out there fishing real deep. You know, the main deal they was keying on was finding the bait fish, and the bait fish was in a lot of different places. Sometimes it'll be in the main lake, sometimes it'll be in the creek, sometimes it'll be in the mouths. You just got to do a lot of searching around, a lot of structure scanning, finding the shad. One of the easiest ways to find the shad, keep an eye on the gulls. When you see a group of gulls in a creek, even if they're not, you know, diving, actively feeding on the shad, if there's a bunch of them in there somewhere in that creek or out there in the middle of the lake, if you see them, there's going to be some big schools of shad around them. Now, a lot of times you can find a lot of shad and not too many fish. You know, and a lot of it's just kind of trial and error. Like I know a lot of the guys this past weekend were live scoping most of their fish, and that's, you know, I've had Garmin live scope ever since they came out, and now Lawrence has got, you know, active target. So that's probably about one of the best ways, once you put the trolling motor down, to start searching for these fish. And I've been using multiple different baits to catch them. If they're real deep, 35 to 55 to 60 foot, you know, some of the baits in 70 and 80 foot, some of it's 15 or 20 foot. So it depends where I find the fish in the shad. If they're really deep, I'll use like a Rapala, a 7/8 ounce ice fishing jig, or they make a 5/8 ounce one, and they also make a real small one too. Most of the shad that the fish are feeding on are really small shad. So, you know, sometimes I try to match the hatch, so to speak, you know, throw the same size that the bait fish are. Other times I'll go completely different, and I'll throw, this is like a Magnum Super Fluke on a scrounger head. I've got it on a 3/4 ounce scrounger head where I can, you know, drop it down to different depths and work it real slow underneath the shad. A lot of it with the live scope, you can actually see when there's individual fish feeding underneath these shad. And then once you find that, then depending on how deep they are, that's when you gotta, you know, play around and pick out your best bait. Another one that's been working real good for me is a big bite jerk minnow. This is a AYU shad, they call it. And I'm throwing it on either a 3/8 ounce big bite head or a 1/4 ounce. The reason I'm using the 3/8 ounce, if the fish are a lot deeper, if they seem like they're higher up in the water column, I'll go to the 1/4 ounce. And basically I'm just trying to get this down in front of the fish or the same depth that they are, and just kind of yo-yo it, you know, back to the boat. The jigging spoon, sometimes I'll cast a slab spoon. I'm usually throwing like a 3/4 ounce to a 1 ounce. I use a lot of different spoons. This is a homemade one. Marty Conrad actually makes them. A Dixie Jet slab spoon will work good. A War Eagle spoon. I usually stick with a white. You know, tail spinners like a Little George or little tail spinners like this here work good. I've got one rigged up here, and you'll notice this one doesn't have a hook on it. Well, the line goes through the bait, and you tie the line on to the treble hook. And in theory, what that does is when you catch a fish, the weight, or the bait, which is the heavy part, slides up the line. He doesn't throw it as easy. Now, if you'll notice, I've got it's a Carolina keeper here, or a bobber stopper. The only reason I don't like throwing it with the line going, without a bobber stopper, a lot of times my line ends up getting hung up on the hook. So, sometimes I use a bobber stopper, sometimes I don't. But I'll use anywhere from a 1/2 ounce to a 3/4 ounce, tail spinner, or like a man's Little George. Now, there's also shallow bite going on. The deeper bite, I think I fished like 4 or 5 hours Sunday. Found a lot of bait in a lot of different coves. I think I only caught like one fish in 5 hours, but then when I found the ones that were active, it was like, cast after cast for about 25, 30 minutes. So you got to have patience. There's a lot of non-productive areas, and a lot of it is timing. You might find the shad and the fish and have to come back, an hour or two later when they're actively feeding. A lot of times it just takes hooking one fish and it gets the rest of the school fired up as well. But one other bait I'll throw out there as well is anywhere from a 5/8 ounce to a 1 ounce spinnerbait. And I'll do the same thing with it that I'm doing with all the other baits. I'll try to find out what depth the fish are at, and I'll slow roll it or yo-yo it up and down underneath the shad and through them fish. Now, like I say, there's also a shallow bite going, rock crawler, wigglewort. I don't think, the water temperature and everything is perfect for it. And I've had a lot of good days, or when the weather's been really good, where I thought it should be a real good shallow bite, but I just haven't been in the right spot for it to work really good. I know some guys are. I seem to be catching one here and one there. So I don't know exactly what type of rock I need to be fishing, how far back in the creeks. I'm still playing with it. I'm hoping as this cool down comes, we'll get more fish moving up. But, rock crawler, wigglewort's really hard to beat on these Ozark lakes. And I'm throwing it on this it's a Halo rod. It's a HFX series. I've got a lot of loose rods, which are great, but I've been playing around with some other different brands of rods, and I know Extreme Outdoors and Baitworks, carries these rods, the Halo rods, and they're really, I think a reasonable rod. I think this one was $129, and it's designed for a crankbait 7-foot medium action. So if you're in the market for a crankbait rod, check them out. Like I say, 129 to 149, depends on which series you get. I also think it's time. I hadn't fished the last couple days, but I'm actually going out tomorrow. And I think it's time to start throwing a jerkbait. The water's pretty clear right now. A good color, this is a Spro mixed stick, and this is a Norman Flake Ghost, I believe. It's kind of like the Norman Flake, but instead of solid, it's a little bit more, it's translucent. This one here is a gray Ghost. It's real similar to like a blue Bandit, but instead of a solid color bait. I like the translucent baits when the sun is up. If it's cloudy, I'm more apt to throw a solid paint like the Blue Bandit or Pearl Blue. In this, I know a lot of the guys this past weekend caught them on a jig too. The isolated brush piles, conservation brush piles. And the depth range seemed to vary anywhere from 20 to 45 feet. The jig bite that I've had, I've been throwing a 3/4 ounce 5-fish lures ultimate cover jig and mixing it up with a football jig and a 3/4 ounce. Most of those fish have been pretty deep on main lake secondary points, especially where there's a channel that comes up against it. Thing is, I just can't get very many bites in an area. When I do get them fish biting out there deep, it's feast or famine. I mean, you can have a ball. You can catch a ton of fish in a short amount of time. And there's all three species of fish out there. There's Kentucky's out there, largemouth, spotted smallmouth, spotted bass. So you get the trifecta of them all in one area on the same bait. So hopefully everybody has a good Thanksgiving, and until next week, good luck at fishing.